Making jewelry is so much fun, and I know you want it to come out beautifully. So today, we're going to be talking about the 5 most common mistakes that people make when it comes to stringing jewelry. Hi, I'm Patti. I'm a jewelry designer here at Fire Mountain Gems and Beads, and I'm so excited to be here today to teach you how to beat these most common challenges. So, the 5 most common mistakes in stringing jewelry are incorrect crimping, stringing too tight, not enough stringing material, not finishing the ends of your strung jewelry, and using the incorrect stringing material for your projects. One really common mistake when it comes to stringing jewelry is incorrect crimping. If you don't crimp the ends of your strung jewelry correctly, they're going to come apart and ruin your piece. So let's look at some examples of incorrect crimps. So first, let's look at this one. You can see real close here, we have our piece of AccuFlex with a crimp on it and the little AccuGuard. Now the crimp here is puffy on both sides. A correctly crimped crimp is going to be crimped completely flat and kind of in a little U shape. So we see that this is flat but puffy, which means that it's not crimped hard enough, and this is going to come apart really easy over a little time. It may feel okay now, but visually inspecting that, it's not correct. Let's look at another one that is incorrectly crimped. We have one here. You can see it's crimped kind of sideways from the AccuGuard, and it's crimped really, really hard. So the crimp is actually, if you look really close, breaking on this side. So it's halfway broken. You want your crimp to be really nice and solid when you're finished crimping it. You don't want any breaks in it. So this one is not correctly crimped. This isn't going to really work for you. So let's see how to crimp correctly so you have nice, tight, solid jewelry. Let's grab some AccuFlex. We'll grab, let's see, I'm going to grab the 0.19 because that's a very common one to use. And 0.19 is the diameter. And let's just cut off a piece. All right. And now this is true of any material that you're crimping. You're going to crimp it all the same way if you're using a tube or a bead crimp. So let's grab our little crimp tube, and I will put that right on. And we'll use an AccuGuard here. You can use an AccuGuard or French wire to finish off the ends. I like the AccuGuards because they're so easy. So let's go ahead and thread through one side of the AccuGuard, up around the little horseshoe, and then back through. And then we're going to go back through the crimp tube. When I'm crimping, a 2x2 crimp tube is just about my favorite thing to use, and I really, really like them in sterling silver, gold fill, or silver fill. The reason being is that those metals are more malleable, and so when you crimp, it crimps tight without breaking. It's a really nice way to do it, and I put these inside almost all of my projects. So now I'll take my crimper, and there's an inside channel and an outside channel. On the inside channel, there's a little indentation there that goes into the crimp tube and makes an indentation. And the outside channel is just round. So let me show you how you use that. So first we're going to use the inside channel with a little indentation, and we're going to grab that crimp tube, and I'm holding it gently right now. And then I'm going to back off just a millimeter to leave room for my crimp cover later. And I'm going to crimp really nice and firmly with that inside channel. And I'm creating a little divot in the crimp on one side, and it's rounded on the other side. That's what you want it to look like in the first step. So that's the first half of crimping correctly. The second half of crimping correctly is to use the outside channel, and that's the rounded channel. So I'm going to turn my piece sideways, just a quarter turn, put it in that channel so the sides are kind of up and down, and I'm going to crimp firmly down, closing that crimp bead up. And sometimes I'll flip it around the other way, and I just want to make sure that I've got a really nice tight crimp that is really going to last in your jewelry. A common mistake in stringing jewelry is stringing too tight. And there are a couple of ways you can string too tight that will be problematic. So let's look at those. The first way is to put your crimp too tight against your AccuGuard. See how the crimp bead is right all the way up against the AccuGuard or French wire if you were using that. You really need to leave a little bit of space there for your crimp cover to be able to go successfully around your crimp bead. So here is the AccuFlex, and then we have a crimp bead, an AccuGuard, and a crimp cover. So I'm just going to thread my crimp bead on. There we go. And thread on the AccuGuard. It's a little horseshoe shape. And you go through the bottom of one side of the horseshoe, up around, and through the top side of the other side out the bottom. And that's what that'll look like. And then the tail goes back through your crimp bead, of course. And then you're going to go through at least one other bead. Okay. So I pulled it nice and tight for now. Let me show you how to create that space. So here is my crimper. I'm going to use the outside channel of the crimper to close up my AccuGuard just a little bit. There we go, so that the bottoms touch. And that'll allow you a nice tight crimp. And then kind of holding on to the tail down here, I'm going to grab with the inside channel of my crimper, very lightly, I'm grabbing that crimp bead. Then pulling the tail tight, not too tight, but nice and snug, I'm going to push on my AccuGuard away from my crimper, and that is going to naturally leave a space. And I'm pushing real tight, lots of pressure. And there I have my really nicely crimped crimp here with just a little bit of a space for the crimp cover. So let's go ahead and turn this sideways. Use the outside channel here to crimp the crimp in nice and tight. And I use that outside little kind of a plier area to do a little extra. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut off my tail below my other bead down here. And now I have a really nice space with which I can put on my crimp cover. Set it on your work surface, and you can use the outside channel of your crimping pliers to pick it up. Just like that. You can readjust it with your fingers if you need to. And then I like to hold it by the AccuGuard and let the crimp fall right in to the crimp cover channel. Should fall in really nicely. And you can just lightly close that up and just kind of go around in a little circle to round that out and close up the gap. And there you have a very nicely crimped end. The other way that you can make a mistake in crimping too tight is to not leave enough slack when you crimp. Now, it seems like you don't want any slack because you don't want extra space at the ends of your piece. But if you leave no slack at all and crimp it very tight, especially with something wide like these rondelles, it doesn't have any room to drape or move. It's stiff and it's not comfortable. So you want to leave a little ease there. And let me show you the right way to do that. So in order to leave slack when you're crimping the second end of your piece, round it like it's going to be worn. So this is a bracelet, so I want it to go all the way this way, and you can see I've got it pulled tight, too tight to really do that accurately. So I'm actually going to pull out a little more space and see if it naturally will lay the way I want. It needs more space. A little bit more, and little adjustments are good. Sometimes that's what you need. Okay, now it lays really nicely in the configuration that I want it to be. So I know that that's where pretty much where I want to crimp it. So there'll be just a little slack in there, but it's necessary. Okay, so then I'm going to go ahead and take my crimper, the inside channel, and grab the crimp bead. And I'm making sure to really push that AccuGuard all the way away to leave space for the crimp cover. Crimp really tight. And turn it sideways. Close that with the outside channel there. Sometimes I do it on both sides. Maybe a little assurance with a little plier grip at the end there. And now I have that crimped so it's not too tight. This is going to drape really nicely around my wrist. A really common mistake that people make in stringing jewelry is not quite leaving enough stringing material at the end of the piece to easily string it through the crimp, through the AccuGuard, or the French wire, whatever you're using. So let's look at a piece. This is a really cute bracelet. One side is finished and the other side I've just cut off, and I feel like this is enough space to crimp with. But the truth is you really need about double that. So a couple of inches is really handy. This is just over an inch, and this will make it very fiddly for me to try and crimp it. If you watch, I'll put the crimp bead on there, and I'll put the AccuGuard on there. Let's see. I love these AccuGuards. These are really wonderful for stringing. Okay, it goes through the bottom of one side, and now look how little space I have to work with it. I kind of have to hold it down here and get in there and try and mush it around. It's very challenging. Sometimes I've even taken a pair of pliers and grabbed it and put it through. But over the years, I've learned that leaving just an extra inch of material makes my life so much easier. And let me show you how much easier it is. Let's look at the same bracelet with just an extra inch or so of material left down here. This is worth the extra investment. I know we're going to cut it off, but it makes my life so much better. So I'm going to go ahead and put on my crimp bead. I have so much space here, breathing room, I feel like. I'm going to go ahead and put the AccuFlex through one side of the AccuGuard. So you can see how easily that's gone through the AccuGuard, and I still have plenty of space to pick this up, put it through my crimp bead, and put it through the other beads. I really recommend leaving just that little extra space for finishing your strung jewelry. An easy mistake to make when stringing jewelry is not actually finishing the ends of your stringing material. Let me show you what I mean. So you can see this end, and let me bring this nice and close so you can see. I have this crimped with just the AccuFlex, is what I used for this one, showing here, and you have made a little loop there, and I've crimped it and put my crimp cover on. This will work. You can do this, but over time, this AccuFlex is actually going to wear. As it rubs against whatever you're putting on, whether it's a jump ring or a loop or something like that, eventually over time, this is going to wear out. So at the other end, you can see that I finished it with an AccuGuard. AccuGuards are a wonderful way to finish your strung jewelry. They really give you a nice finished look, and they protect the wire from fraying over time, so your jewelry will last much longer. Now, if you don't want to use an AccuGuard, another option is to use French wire. Let me grab a little piece of French wire here. You can see it's a very fine coiled tubing, and I would just cut off a little bit, just like about that much. And this is a tube, so I would string my AccuFlex through the tube and back through my crimp bead, kind of like an AccuGuard. There's another way to finish the ends of your jewelry. One of the most common mistakes in stringing jewelry is actually using the wrong stringing material for your project. So let's look at a few different kinds of material and look at what you do and don't want to use for that item. So I have several different beads here because beads is often what we're stringing, so let's talk about those. First, I have these really great little pearls. These are little Druck pearl beads. They're glass inside, but they're very, very lightweight, being so small. They're just 4 millimeters. And so they require a stringing material that's compatible with them. So what would I use for such a tiny bead? Let's look at some different options. First, let's look at AccuFlex. This is one of the most common things that I used for stringing. And AccuFlex comes in several different sizes. So we've got a 0.24, which is the largest, and it's a pretty heavy material. Look at that. You can really see. It's like a very thick thread, kind of. And then there is a 0.19, which is a mid-grade, a mid-size. I use this for a lot. And then there is a 0.14. See that? This one is actually a colored AccuFlex. I thought this would be fun to show you. And it shows up really well here. Look how thin that is. It's really like thin thread. So if I were going to choose one of these to string a little 4 millimeter bead like my Druck pearls, I would probably choose the 0.14. It's going to fit through the hole really well. It's going to have a really nice drape because it is so thin, and it's going to make the bracelet a little more slinky and kind of user-friendly. So let's look at Fireline for my 4 millimeter pearls here. I've got a couple different types of Fireline. This is another great stringing material that a lot of people love. It comes in different weights. So here, for example, I have a 6-pound and a 10-pound. So let me show you the 6-pound. It's really nice and thin. Again, this is like a thin thread. It's very, very durable. Fireline in all of its weights, but see how thin that is. This is great for something like seed beading. You can also use it for a small pearl, like the 4 millimeter pearls. And here is a 10-pound Fireline. You can see that it is very, very thick. It's much thicker than that 6-pound. And it's also a little bit stiffer. It tends to kind of want to bounce back to its original shape. So it's not going to drape as well with a very thin pearl like our 4 millimeter pearl. Moving on, let's look at another bead. So we've got these 8 millimeter glass beads. This is really kind of a mid-sized bead. This one has more possibility with it because it is a mid-sized bead. You can go different ways. If I were using AccuFlex with these, so we have our 0.14, our 0.19, or our 0.24. If I want say it's a bracelet again, if I want it to be very drapey and flowy, I'm probably going to choose the 0.19 AccuFlex for that. It's a really nice weight. It's going to make it drapey and flowy if that's what I want. Now, if I want it to be have more body and be more kind of bangly for a strung piece, I don't know if that's a word. I made that word up. I might use the 0.24 Acuflex for that. I could use either. It just depends on the result that I want from the piece. Now with the fire line, for a mid-sized bead like this, I would probably use the 10 pound because this has a little more body to kind of keep up with the weight of that bead. The 6 pound is super thin and really isn't appropriate for a larger, heavier bead. Now let's look at these great fish beads. Aren't these wonderful? These are glass beads and they have a lot of body, quite a bit of weight to them. So if I were to string these, I would probably want something heavier. I would probably choose my 0.24 Acuflex, a heavier fire line, or maybe I want a stretchy bracelet. I could go with power cord. The power cord, I would probably choose like a 0.8 or a 1 millimeter. 0.8 is my favorite because it makes the easiest knots. Now, if you wanted to do a stretchy bracelet with these little itty bitty beads, you could go with a 0.5 millimeter power cord. And just to kind of wrap this up, because we're talking about appropriate stringing materials, I wanted to bring in some wire. So we have real thin wire like this, and a lot of times people call this beading wire. This is a very thin gauge. I think this is a 28 gauge. It sure is. We pull a little more of that out so you can see. It's very thin, and a lot of people think because it's called beading wire that it's appropriate to string your necklaces and bracelets and things like that on. And actually, you don't want to string a necklace or a bracelet on wire like this, even though it does say beading wire. This kind of beading wire is for embellishing, like wiring beads onto a component or something like that. If you were to string onto this very thin wire, even though it is very flexible and malleable, it's going to kink in funny places and it's not going to drape the way you want a necklace or bracelet to drape. Now we've covered the 5 biggest mistakes in stringing jewelry. Now you've learned how to crimp correctly. You've learned how much stringing material to leave at the end of your piece. You have learned how not to crimp too tightly to leave that slack and to leave space for your crimp cover when you crimp a bead on. You've learned how to properly finish the ends of your piece, and you've learned how to choose the correct stringing material for your project. If you would like more instructional videos, make sure and check out our website. We have so many available for you. I really hope this has helped you. Please make sure and give a little like to the video that spreads it around so more people will see it, and become part of our family both on Facebook and on YouTube. Like what you see so far? Click on the link in the description below to sign up for our email list and learn more about jewelry making techniques and supplies.